coffee. Really, I don't know my coffee. Yeah, I'm trying to focus. So if I stumble, I stammer, I shrug, just know the distraction amongst us. Anyway, good evening and welcome to this conversation. My name is Eddy Kimani, as you heard. And this is a very unique opportunity for me to speak about a conversation that I think I would define myself as a toddler. Toddler in the sense that I've just begun my journey as a visual artist, and I blamed COVID for that in the last 10 months. So one of my first responsibilities is to tell you a little bit about myself, my story to where I am right now as a visual artist. I wear a couple of hats. As you heard from Christine, I've been in media for some time as a broadcast journalist with a specific interest in sports. My period in media lasted about, that was what? About 15 years, up to 2014 when I took up a different responsibility as a communications director for the county government of Nakuru. That's when the new devolution system checked in. So I got an opportunity to take up that role in my home county, and that is Nakuru. And then I proceeded on to work for the governor at the time, Nyamweya, still as his communications director, until that bit ended in 2017. And after that, I found myself jobless. Jobless to, having a normal job where you have your day-to-day responsibility. That I decided then I need to look for something to do. So I think it took time for me to find out exactly what I wanted to do as I delved in very many spaces, including mental health. Now, mental health for me began as a response to a story I shared through Engage Kenya. I don't know how many of you have watched Engage Kenya. It was an amazing platform for people to get inspired, to aspire, and share our stories. And it morphed into this space where I was able now to play my part in using my journey as a lived experience mental health campaigner, which is something I do up until today. Then it progressed on to the point where COVID checked in, and I was forced by circumstances to look for something to deal with my mental health. I had already recovered from depression and anxiety that happened between 2015 and 2017. 2018, 2019, I was just getting back on my feet. 2019, then of course 2020, COVID checked in unannounced, and it forced us to start dealing with things, the new normal in very many things. Where art comes in this story is, in high school, I was that guy in the classroom. We were just sharing with Chief about this. And I was that guy who my destiny would come to help them to draw diagrams. They thought I knew how to draw the heart better than them, so I would help them in that. And over that period of time, I also enjoyed art because I had a neighbor who loved drawing so much, and he would sometimes allow me to sit in a session with him. We were almost age mates, and he was really good at it. So I think that's why I picked up that bit about art. And then I progressed on, of course. Life happened, we start adulting, art sort of takes a back seat. I became a father, became a husband, priorities changed, and I more or less kicked out my passion for art, unknowingly, to deal with now this new side of my life. So then, fast forward to 2020, around May, I needed something to do. I had already been exposed to what therapy is. And there are very many types of therapy for mental health. And art was one of them. So with that awareness, I was able to rekindle a passion that I had as a kid that I had neglected. And I ended up starting to seek that passion that I had back then. So for me, it wasn't hard picking up. I sort of just needed to convince myself that I can do it. And more importantly, I wanted to do it so that I can deal with it as a form of therapy. And it really helped me a lot in terms of dealing with my mental state and embracing what art can do to you in terms of being involved in creating, because art is all about creation. And with that understanding, I chose a medium which I've never used before, and that is wire. And I think there's some images that are scrolling on the screen. I can't tell from here. And these are some of my work that I've been doing. And over the period of about 9-8 months, I've been seeking knowledge and teaching myself how to make this, how to be better in using wire and creating art. So it has morphed from just a form of therapy for me. It has now morphed into what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I ended up setting up a studio. I live in Mombasa, and I have opened up a small space within where I stay that I call my studio and workshop, where I do all this. The name I go by is Made by Eddy, and my focus is on wire, wood, canvas, paint, and I'm still learning. So all that rolled up together is one of the reasons why I said at the beginning that this is a very unique opportunity for me to speak and moderate this conversation with somebody who I think he lives and breathes art as a visual artist. And that's about me. I don't know, I work well with questions, but that will leave that for the end of the session. But I'm on a very special journey as a visual artist. I'm enjoying it, I'm discovering things every day. I'm open to learn, and of course, sitting here with Chief is a great opportunity to hear even. So this is not only for you to listen or to take in as our guests, but I'm also part of you in also learning from Chief Nyamweya. Because again, as I said, this is a journey for me, and I'm really, really enjoying it in terms of becoming better and also doing something with it. You can check out my page on Facebook and Instagram, Made by Eddy, E-W-D-Y, just in case you'd like to see more of what I've been up to with my hands. With wire. Yeah, so allow me to welcome Chief Nyamweya. Now, I will just say this is not the first time I'm meeting him. I've been fortunate enough to work with him in an animation production that he's working on. I'll let you know more about it in this conversation, but it's an honor to be with you here.
The honor is mine.
Yeah, Eric Sanaman.
Asante.
Yeah, so I'd like to just jump right into it, and then at some point I believe we'll have a conversation, either Q&A, then we can also get some takeaways from this conversation. For those who are watching online, I believe we are online. Karibuni sana from wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Because right now, of course, events are global through virtual engagements. So welcome. So Chief, maybe just before I go into what we've prepared here to start the conversation, I'd like you to give us a snippet of who is Chief Nyamweya, where is he from, and yeah, those two questions.
Thank you so much, and perhaps I can start by thanking Baraza Media for having us today, and thanking all of you for being here. I'm so pleased to see so many faces, you know. You never expect these many faces. We forget what things were like before 2020, but
Actually, that's true.
Yeah. Or maybe I took my first AstraZeneca shot, so it might be double vision.
Side effects.
Yes. Who is Chief Nyamweya? I don't want to bore you with too many biographical details. I was born in Nairobi, Kenyatta Hospital. Very shortly thereafter, after just about a month or two of being in Nairobi, my family moved to Kisumu because my parents were working in Kisumu. I spent my first 5 years in Kisumu, grew up on the lakeside in Eddy Kimani, and then shortly thereafter, the family moved to Nairobi, where I spent another 6 years in Nairobi. I went to St. Mary's, which is famous for its extracurricular passion. It's very passionate for extracurricular sports. A lot of the people who are well known from the school are well known for sports and not so much academic. So it's a good environment to grow as an artist. And I grew up the last born in the family, and in Kisii and Lualua, where I'm from, where my parents are from, last borns are famously given a long leash to be able to express themselves a bit more. They don't have as many of the burdens that the older children have to set an example and that kind of thing. So my parents really encouraged me along that way, but I wouldn't say that the artistic thing kicked in until much, much later, at least in a professional sense. I always grew in class. But then about 5-6 years of living in Nairobi, moved to Eldoret, and I went to a school in Eldoret, which was a bit more academic. A lot of my colleagues focused a lot on sciences, accounting, that type of thing, and I felt a bit more pressure to prove myself in those more strictly academic domains. And I was working in that direction. I went to law school. Simultaneously, with being in law school, I was doing accounting at the same time. But the real turning point came with post-election violence. Its effect on my life was similar to the effect of COVID on your life. That it was a period of sitting down and thinking, well, what are we doing? Why am I studying law if rule of law can be thrown out of the window? Just in a matter of a few weeks. So it made me really introspect a lot more about what we are doing here. What the law means to us, what any system of norms means to us. So and also the employment environment was completely broken. There were no good job prospects in those months after the violence. I had graduated in 2007, end of 2007. So I used that time to think a lot more, and what I found was that the world which I was being educated in was divorced from background. They say background to be different. And I saw that life in academia was divorced from the reality that Kenyans live day to day. And I saw that much of the knowledge which I had was useless in the day-to-day life of ordinary Kenyans. Because they give you knowledge about things like the land tenure systems in Kenya, the Swinnerton plan, how we ended up with these land titles that we have. And so my very immediate mission became, how do I translate this information to a wider audience and kind of explain, using Kenyan history and using storytelling, how we got to where we got. And obviously, I started thinking about Mau, I started thinking about this period. And when I was in university, small confession, I was really well known for making more Kenyans, making those revision notes, and my revision notes were very well illustrated, and I tried to compress a lot of ideas into images so that you weren't just reading text, you also see images that would send your mind into other places.
So you incorporated art into the more Kenyans?
Exactly. And that actually is a thing in creativity that what you find is that creativity happens at the intersection of disciplines. And so many of us who are in this creative ecosystem right now, what you find, like I was just talking to Christine, and she was telling me how she was in natural sciences, and then she got into writing, and the two of them, she ended up writing in natural science magazines and that type of thing. You were in broadcast journalism, and then you ended up working in Wire. So, and in my case, it was the same thing. So I find that so many interesting things happen at the intersection of disciplines, and that can be a very interesting place to grow from, and people don't necessarily think about that. So what did the university education give me? What did being in law school give me? It gave me a lot of language, a facility with language, the ability to sit at a desk for long hours, the ability to make Kenyans, all of those things will become very useful later in comics.
Yes.
In a way that I didn't anticipate. So in about 2010, I published my first comic book, which was a half fictionalized history of Eddy Kimani's life. What would happen when he came back from fighting in the Second World War in Burma? You know, who were the people who he met in Nairobi? How did he end up working in the forestry department? How did he end up in the Kiama Kiapoke? And then the comic was really well received. You know, I never expected that my debut, my first comic would be so well received. And it's what, you know, triggered all the other things. I ended up working with the Star for another 4 years, you know, illustrating a comic in the Star. And then after that, I ended up founding an animation company with a friend of mine who had just, you know, come from South Africa, studying animation. You know, very naturally, I branched out into animation, just following the passion. And I'm very motivated by Khalil Gibran's quote in his book, The Prophet, that work is love made manifest. You know, if you cannot work with love, he says, it is better to take alms from the temple. It is better to leave so that you can get bread from those people who are working with love. Because if you make a chair without love, you make a chair that will hurt someone. If you make a podcast without love, you make something that will hurt people. If you make a building without love, so to me that's what art is. It's just working with love, and we cannot get enough of it. Nobody would ever want to eat, you know, a cake that's made without love. Nobody would want to sit on a chair that's made without love. Nobody would want to have art in their house that's made without love.
Let me tell you, I think that you said it's coffee. You said it's coffee. Nobody's making it, is giving it so much love. I mean, it's still on, and it is talking for a while. So, of course, Chief, this is an amazing opportunity to hear stories. It works for me too when you hear stories and journeys of people who are doing what they love. And clearly, your combination of all this, and I think it's all about how life happens. And sometimes it's unfortunate, some of us do not realize how these small things that we find in our journey of life complement where we end up doing what we love doing. And for you, I mean, there is, of course, I don't know how Montaigne comes in there somehow, but still, there's something that you pick from there to do what you're doing right now.
Yes.
So I'll just jump right into what is a topic that I think is very important. And that is to do with comics and how we look at comics as maps. Now, you may consider a comic as a type of map. And the whole idea of flipping through a comic book, going through it from frame to frame is the same way you look at a general map. The way you look at one point, you want to go to this point. So it's a journey. And of course, naturally through comic books, you're able to have that journey and orient yourself and be able to understand what the map and where the map is taking you. So that's the comic book reader, you as a creator. Of course, I will ask you about you as a reader, as a creator, you go through the same journey. But do you see comics this way and also as a place to potentially reorient the meaning and prescriptions of life that has been handed down to us by society, how we engage or how we read a comic book? How would then that translate in how, if for a better way of putting it, what society hands to us?
The analogy of comics as a map, we go to Tracy Mungai, who is one of our organizers tonight. And it was, I think, an article she published in the Elephant. And as soon as I read it, I really loved it. Because if you look at an atlas, what it does is make the world really small. But, you know, it takes all these continents and puts them all in one page, which a child can look at and get a sense of where things are, even if it's a two-dimensional plane. And it's not quite what the world is like, but it gives you a sense. Exactly. I think comics do the same thing. It takes the world and picks a nugget of the world and puts it down into a scale which you can be able to digest. A really good example is one of the most famous graphic novels called Mouse by Art Spiegelman. And he wrote it over a period of 7 years through the 1980s as a result of interviews with his father about the Holocaust. His father was a Holocaust survivor. He was inside Auschwitz concentration camp. And the reason why the graphic novel was so celebrated is that The Holocaust is something so big, you can imagine 6 million people being killed on an industrial scale. That is something which is so difficult to communicate, especially to children.
To comprehend.
To comprehend, just see it. Exactly. But what he was able to do is to take this event in human history and through his interviews with his father, be able to illustrate using analogies of mice and cats, be able to transmit this event. And that's what we're doing. We are ingesting the world, we are ingesting the current events. In my case, I'm ingesting life in Kenya. I'm ingesting, trends in technology and these other things, and trying to put them into a scale that is consumable. And one thing that makes comics extremely powerful is the concept of white space. People think comics is about being able to draw well, but I always point out when I'm doing workshops or trying to teach people how to draw comics that Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or these other great artists would not necessarily be good comic book artists. It's not just about your facility with drawing. It's about how you use the space in between the panels. The most important space in a comic is the space in between the panels, because that is your imagination as the reader. It is you who gives that. So a simple example would be, on one panel, I can draw Knuckles in front of a door. And in the next panel, immediately after that, I draw somebody with a sailor standing in the door frame. I don't tell you it's the same person, but it's your imagination that has connected those Knuckles with the person in the frame. You did that. I didn't do it. So an entire comic book, if you are an effective comic book artist, it depends on how effectively you use that white space. So the panels that I draw are just stepping stones for you to move along with your imagination. And it's a very interesting use of in comic space is the same as time. Whereas when you're watching a film, you're being dragged along by the ticker. You cannot look backwards, you're just moving along and seeing what the director wants you to see. In a comic, you see past and present on one page. It's one panel. You're seeing all 16 panels on one page, and you're moving constantly back and forth to try and make sense of something back here, you're looking in front here. So it changes your perception of time in a way that I'm not aware any other medium does. So, I mean, there are some things that are so powerful about comics that we're only now just catching up to and realizing that comics are much bigger than just Mickey Mouse. Not that there's anything wrong with Mickey Mouse, it has its audience, but in being able to tackle difficult subjects, especially subjects which are difficult, like just even the example of Holocaust I gave you, but there are many other topics that are quite difficult.
Yeah. So bringing this now into the perspective of our society, because I'm trying not to get that and put it in the realm of how we can interpret it to our society, the society around us.
Yes.
Unpredictability.
Yes.
Not having the ability to see the bigger picture, as you described, like when you put it on paper, you can see the whole 16 panels at the same time.
Yes.
And why I ask this is because sometimes we live in a world that so many things are happening so fast. I mean, if I lived life and I could have a vision of panels, seeing the 10th panel is the moment when I'll be hit by a car.
Yeah.
The 10th panel is when I'll have lost my keys to the house.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you see this integrating with how society is around us? Because I'm assuming we can relate to so many ways of how we look at a comic from one frame.
Yeah.
And I think that's how life is.
Yeah.
And maybe not even a definite answer, but a way that we can understand how we can use that panel we have for a comic and see how we can interpret that to our day-to-day lives. Would there be a connection for you?
The most immediate connection that I can see is just a respect for that white space, that blank space, a respect for uncertainty, a respect for your audience's imagination to be able to fill in the gaps. And that respect for space is something that you don't necessarily find. It's a skill that you have to cultivate. When I look at my comics from 10 years ago, I maybe did not respect that white space as much as I do now. And it's an attitude, it's a worldview that you bring to the world, because in any perspective, even as I'm looking out at the audience, I cannot see what's behind me. And even as the audience is looking up toward me, they cannot see what's behind them.
It's what is there in front of them.
Exactly. And what we are calling reality is the aggregation of both things, because we all have those blind spots. And if you count not only our perspective as human beings, but if you also count the perspective of all the other beings that we share the planet with, sentient, non-sentient, trees, plants, etc., all that aggregated together is what we call reality. And anybody who presumes to see the totality is lying to you. And how many people have you met who presume to know the totality? How many people have you met who are convinced that this vaccine is full of poisons that have been made by the Gates and whatnot? Or how many people have you met who have a certain political perspective which they are very convinced about? So I think it's just, and it's not only true of comics, it's true of all creative disciplines. It gives you that humility in the face of uncertainty, and it's a way of celebrating uncertainty, because in my experience, art is the only domain in human life where we respect uncertainty. And by art, I'm taking art in the broadest sense, including even in sports. And like you were in the rally recently, you can imagine if you knew the outcome of a sporting event, you would not be interested. The joy of the sport is in not knowing. Exactly. But in all other domains, when we look, especially in our education system, there's a lot of pressure to put in the right answer. We don't respect the uncertainty of life that is just baked into us. The learning and knowing how to deal with uncertainty. Which leads me now to the next question, which is in regards to uncertainty. And as you've put it, we can't view life the same way we view comic books. But I wish we had the capability of doing that, but we can't. But then again, it's to deal with what we know we have, the uncertainty of not knowing about tomorrow. Now, how then do you grapple with this uncertainty, especially with the data-driven, which is big. It's big right now. Data is really big, and most of you would appreciate that. Fact-checking, impulse, which of course drives our world today. How then would you use or look at uncertainty with these underlying issues? That's the core challenge of education right now. You see, in the past, we came from a situation where knowledge was scarce. We all had to crowd into centralized locations where the knowledge was kept. There was a public library or a public university, and we all crowded in there to go and listen to a sage to tell us how the world is. But that has been decentralized to a large extent. From your house, you can bring the world into you. Just bring the world into you. And so now what becomes the function of these spaces where people used to move? What becomes the function of a university? What becomes the function of our education?
The libraries.
Exactly. Yeah. So to my mind, it's teaching people what to do with the knowledge once you have it, what to do with this information that we're being saturated with, how to make sense of it, how to create filters of meaning. So that there's all this information which I'll take millions of lifetimes to be able to consume it. How do I make a meaning and move through this matrix of information? I had a very interesting experience in 2016 where, just working in animation for a long time, I ended up working with software a lot more, and I got the opportunity to go to Silicon Valley and just study trends in technology, and it's a really good exposure, which brings me actually to the current book which I'm writing in Trust, because my co-author is somebody who I met when I was there. And the thing that was a key thing that they kept on trying to bring home to us, that we are going to be dealing with such volumes of information that the key thing will just be that lesson of living with uncertainty. And creativity becomes very important in that, because it's one of the ways in which we create filters of meaning and make sense of information. So for me, the biggest implications of that is in education, which is why my last two books and so much of what I'm doing right now keeps coming back to education.
So then that means if we embrace uncertainty and the awareness that uncertainty can sort of work for us, especially now when we have so much data-driven and fact-checking, or something that is reachable to us by just a flip of the phone or just going online and picking up information. But still doesn't guarantee you, of course, you'll be certain about certain things. So uncertainty then would mean embracing it and sort of making it your ally.
Yes.
Would it then work?
Yes.
Make it easy in terms of my template vision of the frames of life.
Yeah.
Knowing I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next frame, but I can approach this without doubting myself, whichever way this goes. I know that will go even deeper down of the conversation.
You live in Mombasa.
Yes.
So a really good analogy that I will give you is that of a surfer. The surfer does not control the ocean. They do not control where the wave is going to come from or how the wave is going to come, but they can control their surfboard. And they can determine how they move their board along with the wave.
To work with the wave.
Exactly.
So sometimes you actually can be our ally.
Yes.
That's a big takeaway there. Now let's come to your work. You've mentioned severally that, of course, your first publication was back while in university. After university. What was the name again?
Emergency.
Emergency. And now you really have the third book you're working on right now.
So
is it the third one now?
There have been several books in between, but in my mind, I did graphic novels proper. My first graphic novel proper was Wahengaland, which was published in 2019. And the focus was more about personal transformation. It was a much more introspective, philosophical book. And it looked a lot more to how the individual relates to uncertainty. But my most recent work, which I'm working on right now, which is transmedia, it's both a graphic novel and it is also an animated motion comic. That one is less personal and it's more, it deals more with systemic issues, it deals more with societal issues.
Solution that I'm seeing very accessible right now, but you think it's changing and it's going to be even greater than that?
There are several questions that I've had inside there. I'll maybe try to construct it in my mind before I respond. About puzzle solving. So much of our education is focus on the, I think that's based on an article I wrote in the Elephant about, puzzle solving versus framing questions. And, those are two very different mindsets. When you're solving a puzzle, there's a finite number of solutions. Like a really good example of that is playing chess. There's a finite number of moves, there's a finite number of boxes. But there are very few scenarios in the real world where you find a chessboard. So you can be a very intelligent chess player, knowing how to move on that chessboard with the finite possibilities. But when you're presented with the whole world, with infinite possibilities, and infinite possibilities as a result of any one of those choices, it becomes a lot more complicated. There, now what becomes important is how you frame the question. What are you looking for? Because what you find also depends on what you're looking for. And we didn't get taught that in school. We didn't get taught how to ask good questions. We got taught how to solve puzzle problems. And the domain for puzzle solving is now being taken over by software, which is why they say software is eating the world. Puzzle solving is something computers excel at, which is why you can't beat a computer at chess, no matter how, whether you're Garry Kasparov, you're not going to beat, because it can run through the possibilities very quickly. You asked for an example of a previously serious career, and a really good example is dermatology. Dermatology, you have to go to medical school, specialize on skin for several years to get quite good at it. And, a dermatologist, I think it's 10 years or so many years, will maybe see 30,000 cases, to be 30,000 different types of cases. And, with a really good search engine, you can be able to compare different skin diseases and come up with a very, narrow down your sample set to a certain number of outcomes. And you see this more and more in more and more domains. So you find that human beings are being pushed they're being pushed out of things which previously required puzzle solving. Things which there's a ready answer at the back of the book, we're being pushed out of that. There are systems that can perform that better than us. So the question especially for parents with children, and also people who are about to graduate, is now what becomes our role? My own take on that is that it's creativity. AI and these algorithms are trying very hard also to there's a lot of music that you can listen to that's created by computers, but still we still yearn human expression. That's still that's still the main occupation, that's still our main contribution to the earth. It's not necessarily the function of being able to lift my hand and pick up this water. It's not. I see a future where we are collaborating with these systems to do the things that humans are uniquely good at, to do the more creative things, and we leave the more repetitive puzzle-solving tasks to machines. And that's been my clarion call. That how can I, since there's so much emphasis on, and you see it even in creativity. When I look at the schools that are teaching animation right now in Kenya, so much of the emphasis is on technical ability. How do you use this software? How do you do this particular function? How do you, get a person to do a walk cycle? And all of it is very useful information. But the truth is, most of us working in this industry are self-taught. Most of us taught ourselves how to do these things on YouTube. So what is the unique contribution that the school is going to give you? To my mind, it's about thinking about what story do you want to tell? What do I want to tell you using this medium that you could not have known otherwise? And that is a much more human challenge. It's emphasizing the space for humanities, which especially in Kenya we've neglected a lot. Even from the education ministry, you hear so much emphasis on STEM, and we keep saying no, it's not just about STEM, it's STEAM. The A is very important, the art is very important, and even on a global scale. What is our unique contribution as a country going to be beyond just being a place to outsource technical tasks? What is our contribution going to be?
Look, to some point it feels scary because there's always the thought that machines are going to take over jobs. I remember there was an uproar in the tea farming sector, where they brought in these machines that could actually harvest the tea leaves much more faster than. So it definitely ended up affecting a lot of, the whole equation of employment, guys around the job that they've done for years. So then where does the role of schools then come in? And my thinking would be, what, like, when you go to an art school, would then that be encouraged, that we have at the beginning, you start from the basics, how to hold a pencil, how to draw, how to know paper, how to do this, so that it complements this technology that is advancing so fast. And it's really moving so fast. You're in a space where animation is now being taken over by AI. I'm assuming that it just
in a good way.
In a good way, exactly.
Yeah.
But would we then wrap up all this, the hands-on experience that either like what we were doing before digital access, so that we did a lot of drawing on paper, that whole old school drawing. Can you really wrap it off with technology as fast as it's growing?
There's a quote from Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired magazine, and he talks about how a transformative technology is anything that helps us see the world differently. And to do that, it's not about how new the technology is. If I give you a book and you read something that makes you see the world differently, that is transformative. And a book is a 1,000-year-old technology. So I'm not fascinated by the newness of the technology. And a pencil is a perfect technology. A pencil will never get old for me, because I don't need to plug in things, I don't need to charge anything. As soon as I have an idea, I pick up and I scribble with a pencil, done. But in terms of software speeding up in animation, I'm so excited by it. Now we have something called real-time animation. So much of animation used to be grunt work. You used to have to sit at a desk and make minute movements and do all these things. Now, much of your work goes into designing the puppet, and so much of even the design of the puppet you can do in virtual reality. In Freehand Studios, I'm the co-founder of Freehand Studios with Sarah. So much of the sculpting is being done by a colleague who's a VR sculptor. And he just goes in there, and it makes sculpting much more of a tactile experience, which is much more similar to that of a real sculptor like yourself. Before it was abstracted away because you had a screen that you had to interface with. Now you're doing it with your hands. You're just chopping up that thing and just making it move. And once you have the sculptor, you get a motion capture suit which you put an actor in, and the actor can be able to move, and the animation happens in real time. So things like those are really good, because they save us time to focus on what I think the core competence of animation is, which is storytelling. I can focus more on trying to tell a good story as opposed to making minute movements. Things like those are things we should celebrate. But the only reason why we're able to celebrate that is because we've identified what the core of our discipline is, which is storytelling. The reason why you would see automation as a threat is if you define yourself as a function rather than defining yourself as something deeper, as a human gift, as a human contribution, as a story, as all these other things. And I think also what the technology is provoking us to do is ask more political questions. You brought up the question of the tea cutters and the tea farmers recently. Tea farming wasn't a paradise for workers before AI. They had to deal with poor wages, poor accommodation, and many other challenges. And the technology is just another burden in the context of employers who might not respect the workers' rights. So that's a political problem. It's not a problem with the technology. We should be celebrating the introduction of technologies that are saving us work. But because we've created a society where your ability to eat bread is dependent on working, then it's a threat. So what is work? What if, consider if we framed it differently, what if we had a society where we guaranteed certain rights to every human child that was born? We guaranteed you, the things that the same way a tree is guaranteed soil, sunlight, air, water, when it comes. What if you guaranteed these things to a human being and removed the brutality of surviving from their existence and allowed them to flourish? Some right-wing perspective would say that people will become lazy. That's one perspective. Other people would say that no, humans have an innate desire to share their gifts. And when you remove the brutal struggle of surviving for their life, they will have the space to imagine away from the constraints of survival. And I tend to move with the latter perspective because I think survival really, just constantly living on the edge of death does not necessarily bring out the best in humanity. You actually see the worst in humanity. You see crime rates go up, especially in extreme inequality. You see, people having less time for each other, parents having less time with their children, and I can go on and on and on. That's a political problem.
Yeah, that's true. But then again, it's there. It's there. And I think also then you're left with the question, how do we then rekindle or regain that mystery, the richness, the wonder that we tend to abandon when we grow older? I mean, considering the fact that we're coming from a generation that actually, when you were starting this business, there wasn't CGI and all this money.
Yeah.
But do you find yourself sometimes thinking, I would want to still have that, sit down with a piece of paper, still, because we're still talking about art and vision. How do we get to that without being so distracted with the development, which we are accepting and seeing how they help us, the efficiency and being able to just do what the extra that we cannot do. How do we rekindle that without letting it go away? I gave one good example. I studied adult. And I had to forget about my art. I had to forget that I knew how to do. And it was a struggle for me to start off this journey of visual art because it took a bit of understanding of how to create. And art is all about just creating and being able to come up with something, especially if you're doing it professionally. So this question really sort of got me thinking, how then do we rekindle that without forgetting where we started from, the richness of having just a pen, a pencil, piece of paper
to be imagination. That's it's a powerful question. It's an important question, and I don't think that the question will completely be answered by an individual because an individual is also born into a context. I was also lucky to be born into a family of people who care about my education and who provided me with environments where I could grow. That part I was not responsible for. That part I was given as a gift. My own contribution was just being stubborn. It was not easy. I didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, but you can imagine after your parents have spent all this time putting you through lots to be deciding the political comics. You can imagine it was not an easy. Yeah, so for that it was just being, stubborn. And I think stubbornness can be a virtue. And if used well, there are a few things that people do. Like in my case, I don't have to use and I grow my hair funny, so just make myself allergic to corporates. I thought that was actually, I think it's a myth. They reject you before you come in. That was the right touch. But on a more serious note, there are some responsibilities that belong to the society that cannot be individualized. And I'm realizing that the older I become, I emphasize less the personal responsibility and I emphasize more the collective responsibilities. And I try to speak as much as I can for that collective responsibility. But on the personal side, I would say it has to be stubborn, it has to be curious, it has to be foolish, not take yourself too seriously, because you're going to make. I mean, this, having been committed yourself for many years, that the first stuff you do is not going to be good. And you expect your first script or your first sculpture to be perfect. It's just foolishness. You have to get a lot. And I was lucky that I worked in the newspaper, where the newspaper's number one concern is that you send them you want like level work every day. You don't care how you have to be. So I got over the CEO like, how many people are going to see what I'm doing? You get over that every day. So every day I just did that. And I perfected it on someone else's time. I perfected that skill on someone else's time. So by the time I was reading the newspaper, I already had that discipline.
I think it's also, you also get confident.
Yeah, exactly.
Because once an artist is one of those things that if you don't have confidence, you can easily kill a dream by just questioning yourself once and okay. I question myself a lot. When now, of course, the first time I got an inquiry for something, I really questioned. I'll be honest, I even lied. So I sold that piece because I was not so confident about giving this piece to the world to somebody, and I've never done it that way professionally. Basically, just very much. exercise books for my classmates and all that. But confidence, I believe, is a huge currency when it comes to being in this position.
Yeah, because if you're going to do something truly creative, by definition, you are unqualified. Because it's not been done before. So when you see, and I think that's the attitude that we have to have. You have to always be thinking. For me, every time I sit in front of a blank piece of paper, I'm not beginning. And every single time. Every time I work on a new book, like right now I'm working on a new book, I cannot bask in the nostalgia and glory of the books and published in 2019 nonsense. When you're working on this one, you're being measured by this one. And you're starting every time. And it's a really good way to stay young. Young, not just physically, but young.
But you ask the same question, how do you get to start in front of people and talk and engage? Do you sort of get used to talking to people? No. I had my butterflies when I came in. And I think it's something that once you embrace the idea that every new moment or opportunity you get, it works easy for me when I tell myself, I don't know this people, but I'll do the best that I can do to do what I'm supposed to do at that. So it's something that is relatable to, I think, not only just in art or for people who are in the creative space, even just generally in life. That approach and mindset also comes. Now let's come to the creative economy, a very sensitive topic, a topic that has put so much hatred by creatives, especially in the national government. I mean, we are in a space where we feel other governments around the world are bending their back to actually ensure the creative economy is thriving and they go way out. Unfortunately, we are in a space where I'm not sure if it's having the wrong people, having the wrong policies, is it they do not know that we have a burgeoning creative economy that needs to be given a shot in the arm, that needs to be empowered. We're not asking necessarily the government for money, but we're just saying, work with us, empower us. And of course, it's really all a struggle through the structural and systemic challenges, which you all know for those who are in the creative space, including lack of funding, problems with enforcing copyright and contracts, another very sensitive topic, dealing with cartels, and the most notorious one, copycats, which apparently is a losing battle. But you've written that the Kenyan artist fears starvation, anonymity, and suicide more than he or she does Ezekiel Mutula's censorship crusade.
Yes.
If you had unlimited power, I mean, you have everything, all the resources, all the tools, what's the first thing you would do to set out change in the creative economy? And in other words, what's the lowest hanging fruit that if it is addressed well, by this amazing power that and resources that you have at your disposal, would make a big systematic change? What would it be?
Wow, that's a big one. I think if I had to choose just one thing, I would change it would be an ecological awareness. Being aware of our ecology, being aware of ourselves as a part of that ecology. I would teach that to children as young as possible, and I would have that be the orienting principle in our lives. I'll give you an example. I recently became a bee farmer with like a smart farmer. And what we told the farm manager was something very simple. Whatever you do, whatever you plant, whatever activity you engage in, let it be good for the bees. Because if it's good for the bees, it's good for us. And you don't have to be a genius. Because there are so many possibilities of what to do that will come at you. Oh, should we plant strawberry, should we plant this, should we plant that, should we plant this, but if you just have that as the orienting mechanism, it organizes everything else. You suddenly find yourself planting a lot of trees, indigenous trees with different varieties, different flowers. You suddenly find yourself, taking care of the manure that is coming from the cows, digging these canals in, making nice waterways. And you do all the things that make us such a splendid environment for the human being, but you're doing that simply by taking care of the bee. And you realize that all the things that are bad for the bees are bad for us. The fact that pesticides the land. Please, why are we eating so many pesticides? And I find that there are things in nature, there are things in the environment that if we orient ourselves up, they can be a dead impact for us. And we have that in our cultures. In TC, there's a plant called Nawasisa. Nawasisa, they are totally. So then they just do that. Let's take care of this thing and we will take care of us. And we have other plants that have different in different parts of the country. You might have had people who their future was an elephant. You find that the elephant is very good for very, pathways in the forest and doing all this kind of things. So I feel right now that's the most neglected thing. And Salim Musul, another comic artist I really respect, has been doing a lot of work on that side right now about ecology. And that's the most important contribution that our technologists could make. Right now, I'm writing a lot about blockchain because I think it is one way of removing. I'm kind of going past the blaming because I grew up in a way era. My mind was that way, but I'm old enough to remember. I mean, part of the reason why I'm not scared of technology is because I'm not a digital native. I was not born inside the technology. I was born before, and I saw it come and I grew up with it. So I'm very comfortable with the pencils and the oil and acrylic and all that. So I'm also comfortable with digital. And I don't see them in conflict. So, and we fought back governance for so long. Misery was ubiquitous in Kenya, poverty was ubiquitous, hunger was ubiquitous. It was so, there was so much misery that, and to some extent, there still is, and the few guiding lights of people like that, who, in spite of all that misery and oppression, still found a way to give us permission to mock the president. And you will never know what the ways to give us. I don't know how many people like that. And not just him, all the other people. The institution. Exactly. So, I don't even know I lost, because the question was very good, it had so many answers. What creative economy?
Creative economy?
Yeah.
Given all the resources,
yes.
There is things around, what would be that low-hanging fruit? Get things running well.
So, in terms of copyright, I myself have been involved in IP disputes. I myself have been involved in lawsuits, and I have actually succeeded. And I think it's a lot easier with the technologies available because it's a lot easier to create a video chain. It's a lot easier to, just when you create something, just send an email to yourself with a timestamp there. If you want to go a step further, there's a digitized way of, just put all your stuff in PDF, send an SMS, and you'll get it back. It's not kind of exactly what this usually is for copyright. And I do this routinely. And it's just something you need to build into your process if you're going to work as a professional. And I'm not worried about copycats. I think copycats actually a good thing because the biggest risk that you face as somebody starting out trying to build a name for yourself is not that somebody will copy you, it's that nobody will see what you're doing. With the sheer volume of what's out there. So if you're being copied, I just think it was part of the technique. Noah was not that common when I started in 2010. Now I see a lot more so you're like, that to me is just evidence of impact. And to be Leonardo da Vinci and imagine that nobody else is going to copy your stuff, that's a good
And I think also it goes to say, as much as sometimes we fear what copycats will do, it's a problem that a lot of artists struggle with, especially at the beginning. But that kind of a mindset then gives you the confidence to know that the product goes out there. What they will never take out from you is what is here. That's one of the elements that will give you the confidence that you do what you want to do with my art. It will do double, maybe one or two things. It's mostly for my advantage. But it makes sense. And you have to be
and
they can hope for you exactly.
Yeah, there's a town in China where they just do that. But just to talk to one other thing as to why I mentioned the it's so important because the same way we think of plants and what is good for plants, rather than soil, air, water, is the same way we should think of human beings as well and creating ecosystems. That's why places like Baraza are super important. Having a space where accidents that happen, creative accidents that happen. Who knows after this talk, I might walk off the stage, meet somebody here and something that catalyzes. You you can actually engineer that. You can actually have spaces that we have, right? Especially this Chief Nyamweya area. You have seen a lot of ecosystems come and go, like Park 54 and the others. And the same, not just to come to a question of design, is it going to just be profit driven, just rent space, which is the easiest model to pay for itself, but then it excludes them from pay, or you have spaces that provide certain basics, but then now becomes a question of how do you fund this? It's something which is itself a creative challenge itself. How you design these ecosystems.
All right, guys, if you have a question or two, just prepare them. I think when we are at the end of the session, we have a Q&A. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Q&A. So just start preparing your questions in case you have. So I don't know, for the guys watching online, how you can send to, is there a place they can send to? On the YouTube, good stuff. For those watching on YouTube, you can send your questions on the YouTube chat area. I think that's it. Then we'll be able to deal with them and answer your questions. So, what business models then? There's a lot we talk about from the basics to how it's changing and where the direction is going for us, especially now in Kenya, the political space here in Kenya. What would you encourage our artists to set up as their business models? Of course, the digital space is big. It creates opportunities for some interesting innovations. And innovation is also constantly changing. I'm wondering which ones comes to mind for you as being of particular interest in this period.
Business models.
Business models, yeah. Of course, digital space is big. Is there a particular model that you feel would you ask for advice? Those who would like to get a particular business model.
I'm so wary of giving advice because it's important. Yeah, it's like nobody can engineer Eddy Kimani's career because the circumstances that led to Eddy Kimani are so different. I cannot recreate your childhood and the accidents that led to you doing media. So that's very difficult to do, and I'm shy away from doing that.
Is that unique only? Sorry, is it unique only to the creative space?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the nature of what creative
it is not unique to the creative space, and it's actually invading invading so many other disciplines. We are living in the age of now what they call gig economy, and there's a lot of precarity and stable work, and people sometimes try to make it look like it's a sexy thing, but it's also very dangerous. So people working without insurance, health insurance, all these other benefits that come, and they sell it to us simply.
Business winning.
Exactly. And then we are sold this thing as entrepreneurship. You're told entrepreneur, and then that's basically you're having the wrong food under your legs, but it's being sold back to you. So, which is fine when you're young. So I mean, the one thing I'll do is just the same old thing that if you create value for others, that is the most. If you find a way of creating something valuable for other people, it's the best way to secure your future. If you're creating something that's really useful, the society will find a way of keeping you in existence. If you're giving something of value, then after that it just becomes a question of having good business ethics. Just keeping good records, keeping good account, do what you say. Have a good lawyer to check after complicated engagements, have a good accountant, etc. But all those people will only be useful if you have a good core product that people are interested in and people are willing to pay money for. In my case, that's graphic novels, animations. I'm getting a lot of support currently from institutions like Wahengaland, which is a blockchain. We also do crowdfunding through Bitcoin, which is another blockchain-based crowdfunding platform. So I opened myself up to the world, so that even though my Kenya, my audience is global, and I try to to work in this way. And trust especially has been allegedly spreading like this. So I would just say, try to be as honest as possible, and each person's experiences are unique. The gift that you're going to give to the world is unique. And you just have to cultivate that honesty and really dig deep and be honest.
Honestly, that's one of the biggest aspects of this creative. You pick up work thinking you can deliver something with them, but again, you take it to
Yeah.
Very important. Now, I'm told this is a very important piece for the Baraza session. And it's all about understanding how you find joy and how you cultivate it. Creativity is not easy one. It's heavy. And if you commit to create something, it takes a toll on you, both emotionally and also physically, depending on things. So what are your practices to cultivating joy and maintaining hope? And also, as a quote by Mariam Kaba says, hope is a discipline. How do you respond to this feeling and a feeling of hope and do something, discipline yourself in? Yeah, it's more or less like asking you, then what's your formula? I know there's a formula every artist has, depending on what you want.
There was a time I meditated a lot. I do so less now because I think maybe I've integrated many of those lessons in my life a bit more. But there was a time I deliberately used to force space to just be quiet, just enjoy while doing life, just enjoy, the sound of existence happening without making it. To remember that you're a speck on a speck. A phrase that I got from something, you're a speck on a speck, and at one day you will be solving the ship. And I think just sitting quietly gets you out of your grandiosity, gets you out of drinking too much of your own beliefs. Maybe you don't take it so seriously. Like, at the end, when they go the cookies or whatever, at least you can die happy that I did not give you this that I gave you what I was here to give. There's something which the Jesuit used to do. They used to keep a human skull in their table, momentum of it. Remember you will die. And that helped them keep perspective of what they were doing. And I'll just say generally, one of the things I really have come to despise is the notion of work-life balance. It's one of the most toxic ideas that I've ever come across. The idea of segregating your life into two segments, which is called one is called work, one is called life. Yet you're spending 60% or more of your day on this thing called work. And then you're segregating it off. Say it's a really toxic and absurd notion that you can do. And I know it's a privilege to do for many people that you can do what you love. But at least it should be an aspiration that with this one lifetime that we given, God knows whether or not there's anything beyond the grave. But for this life that we know we have, you really have to integrate. You really have to integrate the two so that in your waking life, in your working life, in your living life, you're creating value. You're putting out work. You cannot segregate. And I know that's very hard to swallow because there are some faiths that integrate better. Like in Islam, you cannot segregate. You cannot say that, when I go to work, it is something separate. You don't do that. Whereas, I can only speak for my background. I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist family, Seventh-day Adventist community, and they're very strict on diet, very strict on all these things. Yet, when somebody goes to work, you can do God the same. You can, sell cigarettes, sell alcohol, sell whatever. But you're being given a paycheck and you feed your family is fine, no problem. And then you go to church and somebody gives something. I really wonder how we're able to create a segregation. But it's nonsense. There is no segregation. We have one life. We have one ecology. We have one air that we are all breathing. We have one planet. The pandemic has not the same thing. It's a very one existence. This segments and fragmentation of life are actually the source of the toxicity and stress. So, if there are any walls in your life, destroy those walls. Try and see your life as one thing. If you really have certain values, just live them day, night, evening. I know it's a struggle. You know, we are human, we all have our challenges, but it's definitely something to aspire.
So, and I think even God is probably the first coming to sort of stop that nonsense with work-life balance.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of that? Basically, you wake up in the same house, you go to work. Yeah, so I think this has been an amazing conversation. I have learned a lot, as I said at the beginning. I am also here as somebody who would like to soak in from somebody who has really, pursued a passion so intimately that he is where, or he's sitting where he's sitting. It's a pleasure to have this conversation. So I think we can have a. If there are any questions that you'd like to share for more important for Chief, today tonight is Chief's evening.
Question?
Yeah, there's a mic. Just say your name and the question.
Hello, my name is Leah. Actually, that was amazing meeting. So very insightful and keep following your passion. So my question is, how important do you think that being a multifaceted person is important? I mean, it's useful as an artist because apart from having the skill to grow or bring it to industries, then you also have the skill to understand very complex topics and bring them out. Because I would think that if all you can do is one thing, say things, but then, as you said, what's the purpose of your painting? You want to tell a story maybe about the political economy and how you see that affecting a certain industry. Then you must also be able to understand that industry, understand politics, understand economics. So how important do you think that being a multifaceted person has influenced your art and your success?
So we can several. Let's take two at a time. There's a gentleman at the back here. So that question is, I think what you're asking me is how important it is to do what you're doing, balancing, leading very important conversation with still being a creative.
Just like having a varied skill set, supposed to be one dimensional.
Exactly.
Yeah. All I do is paint.
Yeah, there is that. Like Eddy, all I do is play with wire. I don't have any. I already grew up. I sit down in the family with people and all that. But yeah, go ahead. There's a gentleman at the back.
Francis Nagaka.
Very good, Francis.
I think my conversation in that one on
Could you say that again, please?
Lucy Network Association. It's
Why did it?
First of all, I want to think that I am man, and as an old man, I'm happy to see that you're coming up to such 10 years. So, what would you have to ask me that? Means, don't go around the game and what to do. Go down where there's lands, go down where our country, there are teachers there. Who understands, they know that we teach English, maths, sciences, that's going to be surviving. So, please, have a movement of teachers. Someone knows about art. You must be an art. Now, if you go and become an artist, for what purpose? I want to be an engineer, doctor, what's things like that. So, that is a good idea. That needs to be multiplied. And I think that you have seen down there. As well as where I welcome the talk about creativity and innovation. I'm one of those people who likes innovation. And when they people from time there as who want innovation and be as a lot of practice. So I'm very, very happy that please go down there. There's a book where they go from there. You can't come to the road. I think you can get some idea. You can't roll by legs, by foot, by means of your wisdom, your experience.
So I think that's some great advice there. What's your name again? Francis. That's your name, Francis. That's amazing, amazing.
Okay. So I'll do my best to fuse both the questions. I'll start with the one that I just had most recently. Francis, I think it's 1 year. Just yesterday, I was in Kisi, and I just came from Kisi. Actually, a lot of these ideas I'm talking about in the budget has come from there. And the farm manager is actually a school teacher, which is near the farm where we are. And we actually practice a lot of these ideas. In addition to, first of all, we want to get right the idea of farm beekeeping, the effect on the environment. And then him being a school teacher, he's able to also help us educate the community about that. We are based in Nyamweya, and I spend half my time there. Always in the Nairobi. And I cannot be in all places, which is also why I publish books, and the books travel at my time. God knows where those books go. They are available digitally, and they also are available physically. But also, it's important to keep in perspective what my scope is. There are certain things that I can accomplish as an individual working in this creative ecosystem with these challenges versus the sort of things which are the responsibility of the state. And those are things that we have to keep in mind, which is why I've also become a lot more politically active, so that we can also remind citizens to go to the state account and use whatever things they have in their disposal, whether it's voting, whether it's petitions in court, whether it's doing all these things, because there's only so much reach individuals have. You can try and amplify your voice through art and these type of things, but ultimately, when it comes to policies that affect millions of people, the most effective tools that we have available are still the state. Whatever fantasies that we have about technology dropping in from space, we still need politically conscious citizens to hold their states accountable for delivering the promises which they make. Certain promises were made about laptops. What has happened in those promises? Certain promises have been made about stadiums, other facilities. What is being done about those things? Because we don't grow up in a vacuum. A human being needs food. A human being needs guidance, access to learning materials, all those things. They're not going to fall out of space. I can give as many motivational talks as possible, but our lives are rooted in material realities. And that's what I'll say about that. On the question of being multifaceted, I don't think you have to try to be multifaceted. Multifaceted is what we are by definition as a human. That is the distinction between you and a dog. You are multifaceted. Now, we unfortunately live in a certain capitalistic political economy which tries its level best to stifle that multifaceted nature. It's not that you're born not being multifaceted, you have to work. Creativity is your nature. When you see somebody who is expressing their creative potential, that's just somebody who was forced in the context of an oppressive capitalistic economy to give expression to something which is, to give expression to their nature. When it's like the ability to sing was already there within the book of gods. It did not come out of space. She was just lucky enough to find an environment that allowed her to sing. The ability, these things are there. My ability to draw is not unique. In any population that you go to, whether it's in a slum, whether it's in wherever, in any population, the same way you have a certain proportion of the population being left-handed, you're going to find a proportion of the population in good employment, guaranteed. You just go look at those houses and look at the pages if it's music and rock. There are people who can draw, but not all of them will have access to the gifts that I was given. Not all of them will have access to the resources that I was given. And I have no contribution. It's just a lack of see. So let it not be luck. For it to be something which is evenly distributed, we have to do political work. We have to do, and it's not something that I've come to yesterday. I have for the longest time in my career avoided politics. I've done my best to, and that's how we are educated in Canada, because we came from a dictatorship. We were trained to be nice, keep your head down, don't touch politics, and entertain people. But what I found is that, and you know that government being 40 to 50% of the advertisements in the newspaper, we know that if you try to wrong tools, you advertise on food and nutrition. So that's just what I would say. I would say that our nature is creative. When I look out at an audience like this, I just see artists. You're all artists. And the only difference is that some people are given the opportunity to find, they're given the time, they're given the space to take time and actually find what that unique gift is, but we all have it. The same way a mango tree is innate, it's born with the ability to bear mango. We are born with the ability to create gifts. There's another one.
Let's give that question to. I will allow you to have a chat with him because I think there's a great connection now in here. We will get good Francis and Chief. That's what
Wahengaland.
All right. Yes.
Hi, let's Chief. As a matter of course, my name about famous form. My name is Tim. Yes. As a matter of working as one, they have to respond to grasp all that you have to share. But I remember you used certain emphasis on education and work. And my question is around, okay, so in your work, do you see as a place for transforming schools, like the schools we were raised in culturally? Is there a way to transform them into spaces that can ask them as is there a possibility for that in our current context? And maybe there is maybe another possibility having schools that are outside the current or current understanding. Maybe create new schools, so to speak, where these ideas around creativity and not individual words. I think you use the puzzle solving as a training. So can we create institutions where really have to teach training instead of puzzle solving, or really create institutions, and enable us to get.
Let's have one question. Let them
Hello, my name is Vanessa. Thank you very much for what you do So my question is, would you consider, would you say that there's privilege in art and just receive all artists? But then in your conversation, you also made clear that for some reason that they don't have time and something. So would you consider that there may be a certain privilege that just like in all other aspects of life, there's some people who can use for that. The other question is that how then we make sure that it is not as such a way of that, because I feel like our creative passion to push forward more, or even there are factors that we are more enabled because I'm living in a better society. So related to that, there is a question that we say that the responsibility lies much on the society, and we as individuals who belong to the society can only pay testament to what the society has provided. You then think that society as a whole has a gap that it has to bridge, and how can we as individuals in this society come together to solve this challenge and provide such
Thank you. Yes, we can. I'll do my best to take them together, to take both the question of how you turn schools into creative ecosystems and what you can do to make that happen. There's a teacher that I know well, because I'm not the authority in education and teaching. I have certain ideas based on my own background as a creator, but I also, when it comes to applying that in terms of pedagogy and literacy, I look to teachers also to learn. And it might really well to follow the paths of Dr. Eddy Kimani. She's really good at this. She really brought out some really good ideas, especially around there being too much of a burden placed on schools to solve everything. Whenever there's an unemployment problem, everybody blames the schools as if schools are everything. There's also what happens outside the school, access to public libraries, going to plays. Unfortunately, when I was growing up, it was such a binary world that you were either in church or you were in the park, and there was little in between. And if I were to relive my childhood again, I would love to see another option. Instead of being forced to go to church or being forced to go to the park, how about have something in between, access to playgrounds, plays, Many other facilities to explore yourself. You work with your hands. You learn so much. You can learn so much just from, this, just from working with wire. There are some things which are not visible for us. You can keep twisting those wires, but they're happening behind. You learn certain things. You connect with certain dots. You see hidden correlations between copper and literature, between copper and politics, between copper and between copper and electrical connect anyway. So it becomes second nature to see the world as integrated, to see the world as unitary, as important. And that's something which art does. It's not something that somebody necessarily tries to do. It's in the process of funneling the world through your singing voice, through your drawing pencil, taking a lot more. And that's something which artists know, but unfortunately, too many educators of the old school don't get. They see it as an unnecessary distraction. And that's just something which we have to just keep singing. We have to just be annoyed, singing. Let's get rid of that loose that everybody knocks and whatever is a fun. Yes, exactly. We just have to be stubborn. But I see change. I see the Kenyans is now I was coming up as an artist. And you just continue being stubborn, just continue amplifying. You never know how far your voice reaches. Like right now, this camera pointing at us, God knows where it goes. Maybe somebody is amazing, something listening, and it will trigger something. So it's not like democracy is a puppet system where it's one person, one impact unit. It's disproportionate. There are some people who have a disproportionate impact in society. I think of someone like Jerry Kingsley, somebody I really admire, who actually recently in character, current novel for us. She's a big inspiration that one person can have this outside impact. If you think about this in Jamaica, such a small country, 5 million people, we have a massively disproportionate impact on culture globally. Whereas Kenya, we have 50 million, we are punching well below. So it's not a perfect measure. It's not necessarily a perfect measure. And I don't think we should get caught up in the science of how much impact can I have or whatever. I try to focus, like even right now, I try to focus on how honest can we be, how urgent is the problem that you're trying to solve, and just trust that honesty. And it goes back to the concept of white space that we talked about earlier.
Everything starts from that white space. I think of it that now that we put it in all this conversation, it starts from there too. How you let that white space then interact with you and how you interact with that. And it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, fantastic. So I know there are many more questions.
There's one hand in the middle.
Can we go with that? Yeah. At the back or in the middle? Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Chief Nyamweya, and I'm an artist. And I heard you mention this, lots of questions. The first one in regards to copyright. You mentioned asking about so we can get the copyright and that. Just wondering if you know like what you use, who you send it to, and if they have any consent. The second question is, I also heard you mentioned blockchain a lot, and I was wondering if you put it to NFT and it's profitable or is it
well, I would start this before focusing on the mechanisms of how to register copyright. Just start from the basics of learning about copyright law. What applies to what applies to industrial patents, copyright, and just understand trademarks, understand the different categories, and understand that it vests the ability to create something. Evidence is a different question. When you create something like this, registering is a very different question. Just understand the basics of that law, learn how the mechanisms you can learn about this example that I get. I don't have the full otherwise, but I'll remember the name I go to run the clock. On the question of NFTs, I might have the opinion more, but actually think blockchain is a transformative. I really believe that it is a transformative technology. Its potential to decentralize, so many functions that are currently centralized in central government. The simple things like land registries, simple things, the things which, how our Kenyan system works. It's not that we lack the know-how. We have all the technical knowledge we need. We have all the IT professionals who solve these problems. It's not a problem. I mean, something like this is quite remarkable, honestly. There are people who come from Egypt and other places and they're impressed. But we always leave a last mile that you need to do physically. And the reason for that is very simple. So you can connect the informal tax. So when you go for your birth certificate, like my son was born, you go and you find these massively long lines, and the massively long lines actually have a very important function in our system. That the massive long lines are recovered, and you find that on the side there is a watchman, there's a policeman waiting. And so basically the long line is the recurrent, and the recurrent is the option B. So there's only that option B, which is the current. Now we are actually giving it that option. The need for that. And it is within reach, but there still needs to be political will. We still need human agency.
The connection.
Exactly. About NFTs, I also think NFTs are quite interesting and quite powerful. As for their speculative use, I would not recommend. I don't even for Bitcoin, even for Ethereum or any of the other existing coins. I don't engage in speculation. I'm more of a buy and hold if possible. I'll accept payment like for one of the early payments of national accepted payment in Ethereum. I was paid about $190 in Ether, which is currently worth $3,000, but I can't find my keys. I'm in the process of looking for that. So it is a powerful technology. I think it's transformative. For the next 2 years, it's going to be wild. And there's going to be a lot of nonsense. You've seen like people start selling at $69 million or whatever. I don't get seduced by the fluctuations. I try to focus on the fundamentals and stop chasing the short-term trends. And long term, it's a brilliant way to have what it Africa offers. And it's a serious challenge to the current art market, which is very important. That system, which is controlled by a few small, museums in London, it's going to be completely destroyed by potential. And yes, the trends are a bit nonsense right now, and it will all crash. The bubble will bust. The same thing with everything. If you look at the early stage of the internet, right now, some have said that we're just after King Bundes creating the World Wide Web. Not very much was happening, especially here in Kenya. Not very much was happening in the World Wide Web in the past decade. And then there's a big .com crash. But that doesn't mean that the internet is nonsense. Internet has turned out to be extremely useful, and my career would not exist without the internet. But was there craft? Absolutely. And will there be craft? Absolutely. Will there be scams, fake ICUs, and all that stuff? Absolutely. But just keep a laser eye on what problem is being solved in terms of the potential of us being able to do peer-to-peer sharing of energy. Completely get rid of KPLC and the extortion cartel system. Completely get rid of them. Have a system where we can generate energy in a decentralized manner, just be able to share with energy. Without even needing to stack our panels can trade each other. Just be able and us to just keep faster.
All right, thank you, Chief Nyamweya. What more can I add? I mean, I'm really grateful that you gave us this time. And, I know you have many questions, but time doesn't allow. But maybe you'll hang around?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can grab a book.
If you come with the book in hand,
there. Yes, so you pass by Sarah, she'll be able to help you. So thank you so much. It's been an honor, and I've learned so much. And like I said, I'm still a student. I like this place when I'm learning and to say we all need to be a sponge. You soak in as much as you can, and that's the only way we can move forward in terms of being the best that we can be in our respective spaces.
A round of applause for our panelists today. Thank you so much, Chief.